In this movie, I'll show you how to use the adaptive wide-angle filter to correct for the extreme distortion associated with this panorama. Now, if you take a look at the layers panel, you'll see that we have a total of 10 layers, all of which are selected. If they aren't selected for you, go up to the Select menu and choose the All Layers command. Then you have one of two options. You can either keep all of these layers by right-clicking inside the image window and choosing Convert to Smart Object. And that'll put all 10 of the layers into a single smart object. Or if you want to save on file size, because that's going to end up creating a huge file, which is what I want to do, then go up to the Layer menu and choose Merge Layers, or you can press Control-E or Command-E on the Mac. Then I'll go ahead and double-click on this file name and get rid of the number and the extension at the end. So it just reads Carrickfergus Castle. And now I'll right-click inside the image window and choose Convert to Smart Object. So either one of those is going to work just fine. Now go up to the Filter menu and choose Adaptive Wide Angle to bring up the big filter window. Notice that by default, correction is set to panorama. You want to leave it that way. And now I'll start things off by shift dragging along this bottom edge like so, in order to constrain that divider between the lawn of the castle and the parking lot here to horizontal. And we do have a little wiggle. We may have to come back to that one later, but for now it's good enough. Now I'll zoom in on the castle and I'll pan over a little bit and shift drag from the corner of this turret all the way over to the left side here in order to also constrain the top of that wall to horizontal. Now I want to constrain this edge to vertical, so I'll shift drag down like so. And notice that vertical constraints appear as magenta. If you don't like that, you can override it by clicking on this little flyout menu icon and choosing the Preferences command. And then for the vertical constraint, I would just click on this magenta swatch to bring up the color picker dialog box and dial in a different color. But I'm happy with the way things are, so I'll just go ahead and cancel out. And notice, by the way, because we have the lens data, I'm not getting that point in the center to manipulate the curvature of the line. That is to say, the adaptive wide angle filter is doing that for me automatically. Now I'll go ahead and drag down this edge while pressing the Shift key in order to constrain it to more or less vertical. There's some wandering associated with this edge. It's probably just a function of this being an old building and all that. All right, I'll go ahead and scroll over here and shift drag down this wall, and I'll shift drag down this wall as well. To correct this facing portion of the castle here, this facing wall, I'm going to switch over to the polygon constraint tool, and I'll go ahead and click here and then click at this location, click down here as well, and click on this corner. And now let me show you a trick. If you press the Shift key as you're dragging along here, as you're moving this point so that you're connecting it in place, then you'll constrain that edge right there to vertical. And the thing is, you've got to do that in advance, because whereas with the independent constraint lines, you can right-click and change your mind, you can't do that with the polygons. If you right-click on this edge, notice that we just have these zoom options to work with. So what do I do about the fact that I failed to constrain this edge right there? Well, I can press and hold the Shift key, and then I can grab this point like so, that anchor point, and that will go ahead and constrain that edge to vertical. So it's a little unpredictable because you never know which edge is going to constrain, but in this case, that took care of the problem there. And if I were to now shift click on this point, I would constrain this wall to horizontal. At least that's what the filter's trying to do. If I don't like that, I would shift click on it again in order to take that constraint away. All right, now I'll shift drag down this wall, but I still have the same tool selected. I didn't mean to do this with the polygon tool, so I'll just click like so in order to complete that shape, and then I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on that triangle to delete it. And now I'll switch back to the standard constraint tool, and I'll go ahead and shift drag down this wall like so. And I might go ahead and drag across this edge. Notice this one turret's a little taller, so I need to scoot this point down. And there's no point in trying to make this guy horizontal. It'll just mess up the image. So I'll just leave that constraint unfixed. And now I'll shift drag down this wall. So you can see it's just a matter of dragging along every single edge that you can find here. I'll go ahead and shift drag down this edge as well in order to constrain it to vertical. And I'll shift drag all the way down this guy in order to constrain that edge, like so. And then I might as well drag along these turrets, although they actually look pretty darn straight. And I'll shift drag down this edge to constrain it to vertical. You don't want to drag along this edge because that's actually a rounded wall. And if you're ever curious about that stuff, then you would just click OK to accept your changes so far and then open one of the original images and take a look at it. All right, now I'll shift drag down this wall and I'll shift drag down this one here as well. And I'll shift drag down this guy. And then finally, I'll shift drag down this one in order to constrain it to vertical. All right. Now I'll zoom out here to take in what I've done so far. And you can see that this bottom edge is something of a mess, but everything else seems to be in okay shape. And if you get to that point where it's looking pretty darn good, but there are some flaws here and there, what I recommend you do is click OK to accept your work so far, because the last thing you want to do is lose this amount of work. And then at this point, we might as well crop the image as well. So I'll switch over to the crop tool, which I can get by pressing the C key. And I'll drag around this portion of the image, the area that I want to keep. And I'll go ahead and move this over. Notice there's like a little truck right there or something, and I don't want him to be in the shot. So I'll just move this edge over to the right a little bit. Then I'll move the top edge up so I can take in more of the sky. Doesn't matter that delete crop pixels is turned on because after all, we're working with a smart object, so it's impossible to crop it. And then you can see as soon as you press the enter key or the return key on the Mac, you're going to see the before version of the image for a moment because Photoshop has to recalculate it. And then press the M key in order to switch back to the rectangular marquee. Okay, so we've managed to do quite a bit. If I press the F12 key in order to restore the distorted panorama, you can see that it was extremely distorted previously and it was leaning down and to the right and it just looked ridiculous. And now if I press Control Z or Command Z on the Mac in order to restore my changes, it looks quite good. But it does not look perfect. We have some tweaking to do, and I'll show you what that tweaking looks like, how we get exactly the results we need in the next movie.